Hello, well, it's Sunday the 27th, and that's when we're recording. And it's that day again, isn't it? We've come around to have an update and take some questions, and long time overdue, have a mixture of intel and spiritual questions from our CC members, which Becky will read out. Oh, look, the dog's saying hello. I didn't think it would be too long. So first of all, some good news for many of you who I know were disappointed when I said that the talk in the White House household was that they were looking to see if they could bring about changes on the earth in a more constitutional way. And many people were understandably quite disappointed in that. So I wanted to give you all some good news. I like to give people good news. That it was actually covered in the mainstream in the United Kingdom, but very hard to find. Wasn't really covered in England as a bit of a clue. It was covered in another country. That in March, and that's what, 2-3 days away from now, an emergency activation or an emergency alert system is to be introduced throughout the United Kingdom on our mobile phones. It's like the EBS of the United States and I suppose Canada, but it's very British. And how it will work is that your phone will suddenly make a sort of a traditional siren type of sound. And do you remember, well, many months ago, people were talking about listen for the sirens, and we all thought they were referring in Britain to air raid sirens. So this could be a bit of a long-term planning here. So the phone will emit a siren type of sound, and then there will be a box that appears on the display, and it will give instructions. And these instructions might be something like stay at home, do not go out between the hours of X and Y, things like that. Now, the phone will not operate this emergency activation if it's on airplane mode or it's switched off. So if you do want to have an emergency alert, make sure as we go into March that your phone is on and fully charged. They have gone to great lengths to say that no users will be charged. There's no cost for this, and you can't ring back on it. So for those of you who were deeply annoyed that there might not be an EBS, I can tell you that the trial run that was concluded in October, November of last year has been reasonably successful and all compatible. When I say compatible, I mean modern phones will operate with this. If you've got, I think as Becky once said, a Nokia brick, then no, it probably won't work. But for most Androids or smartphones, it's going to work. So that's good news for those of you who really wanted to hear that. Intel side, before we go on to do the spiritual part, which is long overdue, are clearly Ukraine. And I wanted to give you some of the intel that maybe you've not picked up or maybe just isn't out there. Let's see, where do we start with Ukraine? This was always going to be a war, but not a war in the true sense. And I've said to a number of people today and yesterday, if I think back to all the wars that have been televised, Cabal started wars, but televised. At night time, when a city is being attacked or bombed, the authorities turn off the street lights and or the government buildings and tell people to turn their lights off. We're all too young, thank goodness, to remember the Second World War in Britain, but there was guys called air raid wardens who would go around shouting to people to turn their light off. It's traditional to turn your light off at night time if you're being bombed. Now, I understand with modern weapons and GPS, a building is a building, whether the sun is there or the moon. In other words, it doesn't move, and therefore it still can be targeted. But nevertheless, you don't give aid to the enemy if the enemy are looking for any particular signs on the ground. And so this is the first war where we had footage from several cities in Ukraine being bombed at night when the streetlights were all on, houses had their lights on, and all the rest of it. So what's that about? What's going on? And it's something that's not really, I haven't seen that question being asked really. It doesn't take a brain scientist to actually find the switch to turn all the power off to a particular part of the city if it's being attacked. And the reality is that the government in Ukraine know full well that what is being targeted by Russian forces are biological laboratories, some command and control for the mercenary cabal troops, some underground communication centers, but mostly it was the laboratories that were connected to Wuhan, etc., etc. Now, why did the mainstream make such a big fuss about Chernobyl, saying that there would be radioactive dust spread over a wide area if the Russians attacked? This just shows how evil and corrupt mainstream media is. And they are literally just mouthing off the instructions from their paymasters. Now, the reason that the cabal, the cabal put facilities underground in Chernobyl was because they knew that the good guys would not launch a cruise missile or a smart bomb attack against Chernobyl, because it would literally, for many, many, many kilometers, cover habitable areas with radioactive material from the earth underneath Chernobyl. And so what these bad guys did was they used that as a shield by placing their biological facilities there. And so when there was attack by the Russians, immediately the mainstream went straight onto that. Now, how do they know that? Because they are journalists, they're not necessarily experts. They were told that. That was the whole rationale of the cabal placing, these are the mafia in that area, placing that there. So the Russians went in with Spetsnaz and other special troops. People perhaps don't realize that after Delta Force and a couple of other really secret groups in the United States of America, the Russians are pretty second. They have some very, very, very well-trained troops. And they were the ones that went into the hospital because of the laboratory underneath that. They were the ones that went in to Chernobyl. That's why there was ground troops fighting. And they weren't actually fighting so much the Ukrainian army as the mercenaries. These cabal troops are not United Nations troops. They're mercenary troops. They're private security firms. And these are the people that actually have been guarded. Some of these top American cabal individuals who ended up in gun battles with, Delta Force or SEALs. And so the cabal uses mercenaries because they pay them. That's all they're there for the money. So the hospital was captured intact, and we know that the Chernobyl was captured intact. So there's a ton of evidence there. A couple of airfields as well, but they were struck with cruise missiles. And then you may or may not know that in Britain, it's now virtually impossible to get Russia Today news. The British government has literally ensured that it's impossible in Britain, apart from one or two areas, to get Russia Today. So, it's a tit for tat because Russia prevented British Airways from flying over or landing in Russia, and a number of other countries now, Finland, some of the Low Countries, have banned Russia from flying over there. It's very interesting. So what have we got on television? We're getting very little. I think people are uploading a load of stuff to YouTube, but I think the cabal are preventing that being posted. So you can see lots of people screaming and shouting and jumping on trains and lots of pitiful children, etc., which is exactly what the cabal want you to see. But what you're not seeing are mercenary troops in these locations. And these locations generally they look like construction sites. There's your first giveaway. They'll literally look like construction sites, and the bases are not necessarily underground, but they are these sort of portable sheds or portable cabins that have been built. And these have been dotted around. And they were dotted around in Ukraine because the cabal thought, they always knew that that Russia would go back into the two provinces, but they never believed that Putin would have the guts to come out of those provinces and strike into Ukraine. And of course he did. So what you see on television is everybody in the mainstream saying that, Putin is an evil man, he's Hitler, all the rest of it. A number of CC members have said to me they feel quite sad about that because they know the truth, and poor old Putin is really getting it. And I just say to you that Putin's very tough, and he knew this. But as a good leader, he didn't like the idea of these biological weapons labs just a stone's throw away from his territory. And he was determined to take them out. And that's exactly what he did. And so we have a situation, I think, where the Ukrainian government have got to come to terms with Putin. They've got to sit around the table and have a discussion, because once the cabal in Ukraine have been utterly destroyed and they'll never come back again, where does that leave the Ukraine government? You see, they NATO won't back them up, and that's been made very clear. The cabal aren't in a position to back them up, because after America, Russia probably has the edge in most conventional weaponry over China. So in other words, if you look at a pecking order, you've got America closely followed by Russia. Russia may not have some of the very advanced stuff that the Chinese have, but in terms of the mainstream material, Russia's very, very capable. And so the cabal can't match them. The cabal's main weapon is mainstream media, all of the stooges they've got into social media, all of the hundreds of platforms they've suddenly just created, the accounts they've just created. And of course, they've got these private mercenaries. But private mercenaries aren't going to stand against tanks, not really. And I'm getting rather sick of these staged photographs of a Russian vehicle burnt out, in a supposedly a city centre, and no devastation around it. And one day we're going to see a picture of this, and then kids on a playground playing. And some of these pictures they've shown, these vehicles are very rusted. They've obviously been knocked out maybe 6 months prior, a year ago, and then brought out and laid out, and the photographs on it. Now we've got a fair few people, and so have others in the Ukraine, who are passing information through. And we go with the information we're given with them, and they're telling us that these mercenary troops are shooting up apartment blocks, then bringing their cabal mainstream guys in, taking pictures and showing that as if the Russians had done it, when there's no Russian troops in that particular district at all. So, what we're seeing is the usual creation by the cabal. But the difficulty for the cabal is this is not their agenda. When the 9/11 occurred, that was their agenda. They had it all sewn up when Kennedy Sr. was shot, murdered, 1963. That was their agenda. So they had people where they wanted. Time and time again, it's always been their call, their agenda. So they had just the right person in just the right place. Now this time they've been completely caught out because it's not their call. So they're having to scrabble around and do all this. Where will it go? Well, if it's just contained within Ukraine, then it won't go anywhere. But if it can spread, or at least the threat of that can spread, then it becomes a worldwide consideration. Trump has already said that, quite rightly actually, if he had been president officially, this would never have happened, and it wouldn't have done. So we have to look at the situation we've got with Trump officially out of office, Biden in office, and a push towards some form of nuclear escalation. And I don't apologize for saying look back to, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Just look at the history there. Because if we get a situation where somebody feels that, they've been pushed too far and starts talking it up, then, other countries will probably, bring in some form of martial law. No military in the good guys' lands can ever do that themselves. that's a coup. And you can't do it easily. So what you need is your elected government, your official civilian administration, to invite you to do it. And I think that's the plan. The plan is, as we saw in Canada, that they were only had it for about 3 days, something like that. But that's all they needed to do the work they needed to do. You don't need an emergency in action to drive away or tow away lorries. You could have done it anyway. So there was a lot behind the scenes in Canada. It doesn't mean those people didn't go through hell. Oh, yes, they did. And what is being portrayed, and I'm not sure how I feel about this, but what's being portrayed is the police are the enemy of the people and the military are independent. Now, that's what we saw in Canada. Now, as those trucking convoys move towards Washington, D.C., are we going to be shown a picture where the Capitol Police are evil and the military, the National Guard, who I understand will turn out, but are not going to take part in any arrests at all? See, Biden officially has the power to call out the National Guard, and the National Guard will, otherwise it's breaking their constitutional oath, they will turn out, but they've said, we're not going to arrest anybody. We're not going to take part in any law enforcement, but we will stand on the streets. So what is it going to be? Is it going to be the usual story that, the police are bad and the public hate the police? And the difficulty here is there are a lot of police officers that are very good, but there are a ton of police that are very bad, actually. And those of you who've been on demonstrations in different countries, you know precisely how bad these police are. So that's the picture that's been painted. And, in many countries, there's going to be an irrevocable split between the people and the police, because the police are seen as the people upholding the status quo, upholding the system. And if somehow the military are called in legitimately and say, right, we are now in control through martial law, well, then they can then do what the plan is. And what is the plan? Well, I think the plan is to rid the world of certain institutions, certain individuals, certain values, certain laws. And then when we have a level playing field, return it back to a civilian government. And then there's got to be fresh elections. There has to be. You can't go through what we're about to go through and not have free and fair elections. So no Dominion voting machines, nobody standing over your shoulder watching you how you voted, as did occur in the general election in the United States. Free and fair elections, and then let's see who is elected and who wins. And I presume that we would have elections in many countries, not all on the same day, but you can't just have one country that has free and fair elections and then your neighbour is still operating under a cabal system. And we've got to move away from maritime naval law to common law. We've got to have new police officers and retrain those officers that can be retrained. We've got to have new judges or retrain those judges that can be retrained. The whole legal system. How about the education system? Some teachers have got to be got rid of. But generally speaking, I think most teachers are good and actually have to have a syllabus or a worksheet that actually reflects education and not just indoctrination. And then the big one, hospitals, medicine, pharmaceuticals. That's a life's work in itself, but it has to be tackled. Every one of these aspects has to be tackled. And so we started with this. We started with the Ukraine now having the mafia kicked out from it. And it's not going to end there. Don't think it's just going to have a dust up and then it's going to settle. Other things have to flow from it. So for those of you who wanted action, you got action. But remember this, that there is a war, and sometimes a statement is made that makes it into the media, which could come from either side. And so try and detach yourself a little bit, because what's being played out is at a very, very complicated level. And sometimes the good guys appear to lose on Monday, but win on Wednesday. And if we're sort of up and down like a seesaw or a yo-yo. It's not good for us. So it's probably better just to recognize that this is more staged than real. You know, I said to Becky, it's the weekend, the war will end. The war stops now. It's a bit like the news of the RV on these Intel boards. You know, you get to the weekend and it basically dies down and then it starts up again. The guys have got round the table and they're recreating it. So the intel is good, but it does tell us that the deep state are still alive and kicking. And those of you who've listened to me have heard for many, many times that I refuse to celebrate. I refuse to say the war's over. So many people tell me the war's won. My response is, not in my backyard, it ain't. So it may be that, you know, the analogy has been given to me of a chess game, and, you know, in 30 moves time, the white hat's going to win the game. And no matter what happens, the white hat cannot lose the game. But what the black hat can do is prolong it by making a really good move, or making a move that the white hat didn't see. But that black hat is still there at the chess table playing a game, and those pieces are still fighting it out. And the collateral damage is you and I, the people who are made to suffer. And finally, before I hand over to the much wanted questions, I'll just say this. This route, as the Americans would say, forgive me, route, as we say here, isn't the best one. And you know, you listen to me, you know I would have done it differently. And I think that it's the awake and aware people, the spiritual people, who have been made to suffer. I think it's the unawake, the ignorant, blissfully unaware, mind-programmed people who've had it easy. Because they're the ones that went and got triple vaccinated with God knows how many boosters. They're the ones that wrap masks around their face at the slightest sign. They're the ones that say, yes, sir, no, sir. What do you want me to do, sir? And they are the ones that in some countries can go to the supermarket, they can get their car repaired, because they've been good little boys and girls and done just what the cabal want. The rest of us, who are spiritual, sovereign, independent, not prepared to give in, we've been made to feel as if we are somehow selfish. That the very fact that we didn't get vaccinated means that other people will die. Now, we're the ones that can't go to a supermarket, maybe, or to the cinema, or to this or to that. You know, I've got CC members in Australia who couldn't get their car into a garage to be fixed because they hadn't been vaccinated. Therefore, they couldn't even go in to the office. So what was the point of all this? Why have the good guys and girls been made to suffer whilst the ignorant and the blissfully mind-controlled people don't know any difference? It's just Monday to Friday for them. So where's the waking up here? I mean, I said to Becky earlier today, we don't actually need to be woken up, do we? People keep saying, oh, it's about waking people up. Well, I'm very awake, as are all of you. We don't need to be woken up. Right? It's these people, the vast majority, unfortunately, you know, the people who will say, I don't believe you, I believe the government, or the government wouldn't do anything to hurt me, or no, the doctors, you've got to trust the doctors, you know. They're the ones that need to be woken up. You know, they're the ones that need to be shocked. And here's the problem, it's the real problem that annoys me. With the poor old Canadians, the people who funded these GoFundMe projects, they're not the brain dead, they're the awake people. So the awake people went and gave the truckers money, and what happened is they get their bank accounts frozen, not the brain dead. So they're not being woken up. You know, what's happening is the good people are being persecuted by the white hats. Now that might sound really harsh. That's exactly what's happening. Because if you're a good person and you've taken three jabs in your arm and you've jumped this high and you've done this and you've done that, and you've had God knows how many COVID tests, you know, life is easy for you. I may say, you know, we don't know what the medical fallout will be, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the way the government's working. And I heard the finance minister of Canada saying that if you're a Trump supporter, well, that may influence whether we take your bank account off you. So how is this actually waking up the people who are brain dead? All it's doing is it's making the likes of you and me, the people who know the truth, more and more angry. And how does that help? Because they keep telling us, keep calm, hold the line. Don't like that line. But they're doing things that are attacking us. So the white hats are doing things which adversely affect the awake and the aware. If the white hats want to wake up the mainstream and they want to actually affect those who are blissfully unaware and mind programmed, then they better change their tack and start aiming material at those very people. Because at the moment, it's only the awake and the aware who are being penalized and have been penalized. And that's a fact. You know yourselves, all of you in the countries that you're listening to me, you know how hard it has been to stay sovereign. And you know how easy it is. Here in Great Britain, I'm of a certain age. I could wander in to any of these places and have my arm filled full of God knows what, free of charge. And in some countries, they were buying people hamburgers, or they were buying them this, or they were buying them that. So determined were they to give people injections. So if we're going to actually wake up this great mass of people, it's no good keep on sticking the difficult ammunition at the awake and the aware. I've said it. We are already awake. We don't need to be woken up anymore. Thank you. What you need to do, I'm addressing the people who are presumably, are organizing this. Why don't you turn your attention on the masses of people who are unawake, unaware, mind controlled, ignorant, stupid, whatever you want to call them. Why don't you aim it at those people and get those people to suddenly have to challenge themselves as to what's right and what's wrong? It's not effective at the moment, not really. And I know there are hundreds of thousands of people out there throughout the world listening to my words who would say, yeah, you're about right there, Simon. I've seen people who, this is you talking, I've seen people in my street or my block who are doing what the government wants, and life hasn't changed for them. But I've had people say to me in many different countries, I refuse to do this and that and the other. I don't want my children inoculated, so I pull my kids out of school, and I'm getting people banging on my door. These are CC members telling me, trying to get my kids to be vaccinated or this, that, and the other. Why are spiritual, God-fearing people being attacked? Now, I know that someone who's very learned in religion would say that's always been the way, Simon. You pick up your Bible and you will see that the believers in God have always got it in the neck, and the great mass of people, didn't. Well, yeah, I thought we'd moved on a bit from the time of the Bible. I thought we were a bit more with it. So I would like to see a change. I would like to see the heat coming off the spiritual, sovereign, awake and aware people. And I'd like to see the heat onto those people who are so fast asleep that they're more like a hedgehog that's gone to sleep in October, and come April, you're poking it with a stick and saying, it's spring, you better wake up. Right, Becky, let's have some questions.
Aha, you managed to catch me out. I literally just changed the page. I'm having to change pages, and I was watching you, and then
I knew I could do it. Well, it was right, a dog. The dog told me to do it then. Go
on. I'm getting questions from two different places. One is the questions for Simon on Mighty Networks, our forum for connecting consciousness members. And the other is from our coordinators who've asked their members for questions. And my first question, because I think it ties in quite well with what you were saying, I just need to change screen.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll just say that, Mighty Networks, people can post questions for me on Mighty Networks, and Rebecca and others do collect those questions. So it's a good place to post questions, because if you post it there, there's a good chance it'll find its way onto podcasts.
Okay, I found first question. This is actually from our USA coordinator, Graham, who says, Dear Simon, what recommendations do you have to stay grounded, calm and heart-centered while enjoying the journey and not getting too distracted by all the intel and theatre? Thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, Graham. We obviously know Graham very well. As one word I don't think we can use there, Graham, is enjoy the journey. That is a word that patriots use, who are supremely confident in the outcome. And I am confident in the outcome, but I head a spiritual organization and I know the pain that people feel, as does Graham. I don't think we can enjoy the journey, and others, greater than I will go on their shows and say how much they're enjoying it. I'm not enjoying it. I wouldn't have done it like this at all. And I just touched on it, and I think Becky's picked up here, that if we spend every waking moment going from one intel board to the next, trying to see what there is on Twitter or YouTube, we begin to live our life all around the war or around this particular topic. And the values that we normally have around the home or of our loved ones, our family, can get lost. And I think it's very important to be strong. It really is important to be strong, to never give in. But we do have to remember that we can't actually influence it. Not on a global scale yet. That's not our job in CC. Our job in CC is not to influence what is happening. Our job is to support each other, to say, I believe that we will come out the other end in the way that we in CC want, not the way that some of these half-dead, mind-dead people want. If they want anything at all, I don't know. But we have a vision, all of us, of fairness and truth and sovereignty. And so we mustn't get too heavily invested in what is occurring, because remember, we are 75% seeing cabal news. And so the information we're getting is inaccurate, it's portrayed deliberately to lie to us. So what I'd ask you to do is to remember that this is playing out not for your benefit. That's why you shouldn't get too heavily involved in it. It's not for you. You know the truth. All of this stuff on YouTube is not for you. It's for the people who are mindless, who believe what comes out of the BBC or CNN, etc., etc. What we need to do is to remember that this is just a small snapshot of what life is about, and that we are going to come through this. The earth that we come into is going to be very different, and the laws and the rules than we have now. And so we are waiting for that moment, actually. We're waiting for that new birth so that we can then go forward and do all the things that we want to do as best we can do. So just remember that what is happening is not aimed at you. So therefore you should be able to switch off from it. This is aimed at all the other people who don't know the truth. Becky was out the other day, and she told me that she bumped into just an ordinary person. And they had a discussion, because obviously we always try to educate people in a gentle way. And this woman had said to Becky, well, it's a good job Trump wasn't isn't the president, because he'd have called a war and we'd all be dead. And Becky said, well, actually, in the 4 years that Trump was president, there wasn't a single war. And the woman said, oh, yeah, you're right. Which shows you the power of the BBC. It shows you the power of the mainstream media. So Trump, the warmonger. And what we need to do is to think about, let's look for signs where the white hats are showing others are warmongers. But let's not then spend every waking minute analysing and watching it. Because I know it with the RV. I've seen it with people with the RV. They're waiting for the RV. And some of them have been at it for 4 or 5 years. And that's all they live, breathe and eat is the RV. And they're up and down. And it's so easy to get caught in on that. So it's a good question, because it affects all of us. Your families and your friends, good friends, are more important than the latest intel. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I completely agree. I just also wanted to add that one of the things that we've been doing within Connecting Consciousness, because our members like to meet within the local state or region or country for Zoom meetings to connect with all their members and have chats about things, one of the things that we introduced were spiritual topics. And we've been doing this for a few months now. A lovely lady called Chris and I work on these spiritual topics and then share them with coordinators who then share them with the members. In November, we started with heart-centered living. And then in December, we talked about thriving through the holidays. In January, we talked about empathy and compassion. In February, we've been talking about raising your vibration. And in March, we're going to be talking about our emotions and how our emotional body is connected with our thoughts and how it affects our physical body, and how our spiritual body comes into all of this. And the idea behind these is not that we're not teaching anything, but we are sharing topic ideas to be discussed to hopefully enable people to look a bit more deeply into how they are and how they are feeling, how they react to things, and how they can keep themselves calm and centered through all of this, because it is really stressful times. It can be really stressful times if you start focusing on it for too long.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, I'll have to switch to something else now to ask a question.
Yeah, I think it's important that, you know, we while you're finding that question, we do tackle this, because it doesn't matter what culture, which country, you know, our members are in. These are questions that are coming up time and time again throughout all of these communities, because we are all human and we're all, you know, members of planet Earth. You know, it's not surprising, therefore, that people are struggling, and there's no shame to say that you're struggling, because the system is against us. That's why we're struggling.
Okay, yes. So this question in Mighty Networks is from a member in Norway, and Marican says, "Dear Simon and Becky, thank you for offering a bit of refuge in this insane world. My husband is afraid I might be going crazy because I have woken up, so to speak. One question. Some say Norway is the head of the snake in relation to the deep state. I keep seeing Norwegian officials making fool of themselves in international matters, so it would make sense if they were easy puppet targets. Do you have any intel from up here? Are there any white hats in Norway, or are we it, as in we the people? Thank you."
No, that's not quite right, thank goodness. Norwegian people are rather unusual, and that, I mean that in a good way. And it was always the cabal's intent to try and control Norway because of the unusually high vibrational energy that we associate with Norway. The Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights, whilst not exclusive to Norway, is one of the finest, and that's a lot to do with the energy that hangs around that location. When you see government people making fools of themselves, that's generally because the white hats are giving them orders to do so. Think about Biden. The more a supposed establishment leader makes an idiot of his or herself, they're under orders to undermine their credibility with the people. This is one of the routes that they've gone down with this constitutional approach. So no, the more idiots that you get, people talking nonsense and looking an idiot, then that's actually a good sign. There are lots of white hats in Norway, I promise you that, but it was always wanted to be controlled by the people who had the money, and those days gone by, the cabal had the money. So no, I don't have any concerns for Norway at the moment. I have more concerns for other countries. Thank you for your question.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, my next question is about Finland, and it's from Harry. Is Finland amongst those countries which Russia would take over? I've heard mainly that the countries are the Baltic countries and Ukraine, but once I read a text where also Finland was included. Finland was an autonomous part of Russian Imperium, 1809 to 1917?
Well, the history is difficult. I think about what we would call the Winter War, when Russia attacked Finland, eventually beat them, although the Finns fought remarkably well. No, whilst Finland borders very close to what we would call Leningrad in the good old days, I think you'll find that Finland will be a sovereign country. And indeed, we know the White Hats are in control because today Finland has banned all flights from Russia overflying or landing in Finland. So no Russian civilian airliner can now overfly Finland or land there. Now you might say to me, well, why is that a White Hat operation? Because what the White Hats want to do is to present to the world an intransigent West, an intransigent NATO. They want to see an overreaction from other countries who've got nothing to do with this at all, like Finland. Finland could say, well, we're right on the border with Russia and they've invaded us. So would you really then go and ban Russian airlines from landing? Don't you think that's going to actually make the Russian bear growl at you? Having had your head bashed in by the Russians, and I mean that because that's exactly what happened. Think of the Mannerheim line and how well the Finns held it until they were completely overrun. And then, of course, the Germans attacked with the Finns' support, and then the Russians came back, and the Finns paid a heavy price for having an association with the Germans. So once they were allies, they had an association with them. And then Dietl, the mountain troop guy, was quickly told by the Finnish government to get out because the Russians were going to take over the Finnish government. And so when you look at a country's history, the last thing you want to be doing is upsetting the Russian bear. So when Finland went and did this by banning the Russian airlines, we know that that's part of a plan, and we know that Putin's not going to be overly cross with that. So Finland will have its own sovereignty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question is from Colin from Ireland. From an absolutely practical level, what advice would you give us and our families for the next 6 weeks or 6 months in regarding to food and fuel and money and so on? Oh, and I've got another question. Do you want to do that one first?
Yeah, it can easily be answered it because, for the last 7-8 years, I have said to people 2 to 3 weeks worth of food, water, and if you've got pets, so, as many people do, make sure you've got food for them, an ability to cook it on some form of portable cooking stove, batteries for lighting. Some of the American preppers, they've got it down to fine art, but most people, it's candles and a box of matches. Well, that ain't good enough. I've always said 2 to 3 weeks. I always have. Tinned food and vitamins, because tinned food doesn't have any vitamins, as Captain Scott of the Antarctic, if he were alive today, would tell you the mistake he made. I don't think we need months of food, but certainly the more you can store away, the better. It would be very, very unwise to imagine that you could easily go down to the supermarket. Look, I've just talked about this emergency alert. Supposing that phone goes off of yours and it says, you've got to stay home for the next 3 days. Martial law. Right. And then after that, it might say you can only go out between the hours of 10 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon, and only to go to the supermarket. So, make it easy for yourself. Get the heavy stuff in now, so that if you do have to go to the supermarket, it's just your loaf of bread and your milk and stuff you can easily carry. And remember that there would be rationing in times of great need. And so it's be wise to have that stock. What's the second question?
Do you believe international talk of Putin being kicked out of the SWIFT system is cover for the implementation of the QFS?
Oh, many of us who are party to the QFS laughed out loud to hear that. We just think that's an in joke. We don't, because I said when I heard that, well, that doesn't mean anything to, you know, I thought, how does that actually educate the unawake and unaware? How does it educate them? It doesn't. So it's got to be an in joke for us. You know, for the last few months, SWIFT and QFS have been running tandem, hand in hand. And we are all going to be off the SWIFT system, probably in a year's time. But at the moment, we'll be in this transitional phase. So, you know, it makes no difference. I mean, but, you know, how does the man next door, if he hears we're going to be kicked off the SWIFT system, and he'll say, oh, that's to do with the banking. Well, that makes it hard for Russia to do banking. No, it's a very strange thing. I think it's just an in-joke for those of us who are deeply involved with the QFS. It's just to make us happy, I think, and laugh. Because otherwise it has no practical value. It doesn't wake anybody up. It could be code word for all the governments, couldn't it? It could be, I don't know, when they do that, maybe that's when there's an official switch over, but it makes no difference. It's just nonsensical. Thank you. It's a good question though, because you know, I laughed when I heard it.
Okay. This is a question about Turkey. Do you have any intel on what the implications are for Turkey within the evolving world situation, i.e. relating to the removal of the cabal's puppet government's ultimate freedom of speech and ability to prosper?
Right. It's a very important question, because Turkey is one of those countries, and not many of them, that sit uncomfortably between two worlds, or two cultures, or two religions. And you know, it's very difficult for our government at the best of times to balance its people, you know, in such a fashion. And so there's always been one group which was heavily invested in the cabal corruption, and one group that was quite adamantly against it. The short answer is they don't know. I think that they will throw their lot in with the winning side. There are a number of countries which are standing on the edge at the moment, watching to see which side comes out on top. And Putin's attack has really pushed a lot of people who are on the fence into the camp of the white hats, because for the first time they've seen a white hat, and that is Putin, prepared to use military force, because that's the one thing the cabal don't have. They don't have an army. They have a lot of private security guards and cabal groups, but they don't have the money to fund them. They don't have the access to the serious weaponry. And so this has really focused the minds. And I think that, you know, with a country with different cultures, it sometimes takes an external force to focus the minds. The short answer is I don't know what the result for Turkey will be. And it's one of those ones that I hope that the people of Turkey will have a big say in it, rather than having something imposed. It's a good question. It's something I've been following, and the genuine is I just don't know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A question from Michael from Ireland. Now, one of the questions is one member would like more information about the EBS, and you did share that earlier.
Yeah.
And another member asked if Simon has any idea how long it will take for GSARA to roll out. That's the global one.
Thanks. Not the American one. I sometimes Becky laughs because I sometimes get the two mixed. I just don't think you could roll the American one out much before the world. Otherwise, you'd have such a dichotomy. You'd have United States operating under one system and the rest of the world operating on the same old cabal lines. So that's not going to work. So I would see them all happening quite quickly. The old talk used to be, in terms of the RV, it was a shotgun approach, a bang, and then everyone was going to get their redemption, or the countries were going to get sorted out all at the same time. And I think that this is probably very similar. So, for instance, you will find some countries more ahead. You know, some countries more willing or more capable, have more capable employees who are more happy to implement this, and then other countries where they're very miserable and don't want to change from the old system. And I used to get £100 or $100 or 100 whatever from this guy because he was bribing me for 20 years in the courts, or the doctors or the police force or whatever. And now I'm going to have to go to a system where I can't be bribed anymore. So there are going to be a lot of miserable people. But the reality is that this change is earthwide, and some countries will lag behind, some will be ahead. But the people of those countries will basically force their governments to enact this. Otherwise, they'll never see the light of day again. So I'm very, very positive about this. I think it will not be instantaneous, but I think within a few days or a few weeks, all countries on the planet will actually be at the same position. Okay, good question.
Okay, thank you. This is a question from someone in Singapore, and it has a lot of hearts and 100% and so on. So it's a very popular comment.
Oh, well, right, right. I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say this is something that a lot of people are with.
Yeah.
So a feeling is growing inside myself, and our more active core of members.
Mm-hmm.
The longer this all goes on, and the more collateral damage there is, this whole affair is looking less and less like good versus evil, and more like two evils fighting it out.
Mm-hmm.
Just that one side claims some higher divine power is behind its centralized plan as its differentiator,
Mm-hmm.
as to why it's the right and should be the preferred choice to live under.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do as sovereign beings to end this all and not live under anyone's rule or judgment, but just be guided by our inner truth and left alone to do so? I ask because it's looking more and more likely that all will be left is either to leave this planet or devolve into anarchy and physically fight for our own little space, or die trying, as nobody can be trusted anymore. There is nothing holy or righteous about any of this, whatever justifications are preferred.
Right. Okay. No, I fully understand the question, and I know where you're coming from, and I understand why it's got so many likes. The difficulty is that we are in a cabal-controlled environment, and we've not got Angel Michael coming down with his gold or silver wings. I'm not sure which color they are, and then bringing this divine energy to it. We are having to change it ourselves. And you might say, well, I can't change it. But the people who are in the position are us, they're people, and they are having to use and work within the systems that are standard on this earth, which means that they're not the divine systems. They are the systems of destruction and the systems of duplicity and politics. Hopefully they're not of hate and anger, but of justice and retribution. Nothing wrong in that, actually, as long as it's done properly. And so that's what I was trying to say earlier, what we're playing out here is not for us. Now, we've risen above that. This is being played out for those who are still down there, way below us, in terms of their understanding or their conceptualization of what the heck is playing out here. When you have a group of good people who have tried consistently to bring change to the planet and been stopped, they then realized that they had to play the game differently. You had one of the greatest presidents murdered. You had thousands of Americans and non-American murdered with the Twin Towers. You've had so many homeopathic health practitioners murdered. You've had so many good people murdered that maybe standing on the street corner and preaching love and best wishes actually isn't going to do anything. So maybe you've got to fight like this, and that's exactly what's occurring. So what you're seeing are not two evil people fighting. You're seeing one force that is a champion of good and one force which is beholden to evil, but they are fighting with the weapons that are available on this earth. at this time. And the plan is, of course, that when evil is thrown off, we will have a much better understanding, greater education of what's occurred, and we will have a sovereign being. And we know this is true because the plan is to do away with politics. And politics and politicians are the worst way for a people to be governed. The best way for people to be governed is for the people to govern themselves with a very small group who will coordinate and organize that. So please don't make the mistake that this is two evil forces fighting and that you're going to have to live under one or the other. This is evil and good fighting for the control of humanity, but we are fighting with the weapons that we have to hand. So, I don't share that vision. I've met some of these people, only a few, but I have met these people who are fighting for good. And, some of them are CC members. Let me put it to you like that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question is from Athena, our Ohio state coordinator, who says, thank you, Becky and Simon, for this opportunity. Ohio members are asking, what are their house-shaking explosions in the middle of the night in northeast Ohio? No bombs, not an earthquake, plenty of oil refineries and fracking sites, though. Much love, Athena.
One of the problems with the fracking under the Obama administration was that it gave a good excuse to extend tunnels. It had nothing to do with fracking. It was just tunnel extension for bases. When you hear a boom or a rumble, it is not necessarily an underground base that has been destroyed. It is more likely to be the tunnel system with the shock wave from that initial demolition charge traveling down that tunnel that you are hearing. A bit like a train, one end of the track and it goes to the other, this movement across. Sometimes people report that, sometimes they just report the noise in their own area. It could well be an underground base, but it's generally tunnels. You see, America is enormous as a country, and these tunnel systems are quite extensive and at different depths. So I think what you're hearing is the shockwave from an explosion designed to disable or decommission one of these bases or tunnel groups, and then the shockwaves coming out. That's what I think it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few questions from Chinese members now,
Good.
or members living in China.
Good.
Is Xi a white hat working with Trump and others? I recently heard of the biolabs in Taiwan. Will Xi be used like Putin to take out the Taiwan biolabs?
No information of biolabs in Taiwan. No information of that at all. Xi is very much working with Modi, with Putin, and with Trump, and indeed with the Korean government of the North. The point is that the Chinese Communist Party is the party that, although ostensibly all Chinese politicians must be a member of the party, it is a separate machine and has its own funding stream, has its own command and control. And, that is, people keep saying to me, Israel is the last country, to be dealt with. Israel is last. It isn't actually, it's the Chinese Communist Party. That's the real takedown. That's the real interesting one. If you think about Nazi Germany, you had the Nazi Party, which was a political party within the state. And it had its own Nazi troops, which were separate from the German military. And there was an attempt in 1944 to kill the head of that. The bomb went off and didn't kill Hitler. So there are many attempts to look at how the Chinese Communist Party can be separated from the official Chinese government. And all of the Chinese elders, certainly through their cultural traditions, look on the Chinese Communist Party as upstarts, as new. You know, their elder tradition goes back thousands of years in China. Good God, it was the Chinese that created gunpowder. Chinese had fireworks, while the British were still going around chipping arrowheads out of flint. So it makes me cross when Westerners make fun of other countries, where they don't actually understand the history and the culture of those countries, like the Indian people. I mean, the culture there is incredible. So I think that what will be fascinating is to watch the play out between the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese people en masse. And remember, there are a number of explosions. I can say that 2 or 3 of them were car bombs, and there are 2 that were advanced weapons, where Chinese Communist Party headquarter offices in China were destroyed. And it wasn't the Americans doing that. Let's get that clear. Or the Finnish, or the French. There was a real takedown of some of the command and control of the Chinese Communist Party in China. So we tend to be fixated on Ukraine, but if you look around the world, there are some very exciting things happening. It's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The other question from China is, I learned of the new federal state of China. Will Xi be part of that? Does Simon have a ballpark estimate of when the CCP will be removed from power? I liked what I heard about the new federal state of China.
Well, you see, the thing is that countries are looking at the 1776 history of America, and looking at the Constitution, and looking at the Republic, and understanding what it means to have a Constitution, what it means to have that. And a lot of countries want to emulate it, and indeed, those that are going to go into the Nasara Jasara and the new quantum system will have to have a Bill of Rights, a Constitution. And so, you know, you are a sovereign state. Now, I don't know whether it be called a federal state or whatever. Maybe China will be federal because it will have provinces. But that is ultimately where it needs to go. And I would suggest that as one of the white hats, Xi Jinping would be the leader, but perhaps after free and fair elections, he might decide to retire, step down and let someone else do it. Maybe we're going to move away from presidents, prime ministers. Maybe we're going to have commander-in-chiefs of the army, enablers, or what did we have in Britain when the King of England had his head chopped off because we had a civil war? Most people don't remember that in terms of the history books. Yeah, we did. We had an uprising here in Great Britain, and the king was beheaded. His head was chopped off. Charles I. Charles II came along. And we had a guy militarily who name was Cromwell, who ruled England while there was no royal family, and he was called the Great Protector. That was his job. He was the protector. He protected. So what's happened in times of great stress is that countries have brought to the fore individuals who don't want the label of king or queen or prime minister or president because of the history associated with it. They want something that's independent. So Cromwell was the protector, Lord Protector, because he's close to God. So Lord Protector, I think, was his official term in Parliament. And maybe that's what we're going to see. Maybe we're going to see these different people with this non-historical name. And that would be very interesting. So let's try and remember that and see in the coming months whether that's what occurs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this question is from our South American Continental Coordinator, Johanna, who says, I'd just like to ask if you have any intel regarding South America at this point. Thank you. And I was just thinking, can we add Mexico to this? Because you were hoping to do a Q&A with all of Mexico CC, and the members unfortunately the link didn't work and you were unable to connect with them yesterday. So we will be rearranging that for as soon as possible. But did you have anything to add here for the Mexico members as well as South America?
Well, I mean, I was in communication with the Mexico coordinator, and I actually wrote and said to her, look, the link's not working. And I think she sent another link and it still didn't work. The cabal is still alive and well, and they don't like CC spreading truth and light. And so we will get attacked like this electronically from time to time. People have just got to be calm, and we'll get round to it, and we will get one out to you. It's difficult because Mexico probably would like to become part of America proper. That will be a decision for the people, but I can foresee Mexico being part of the United States. In terms of South America, it has so much riches in its land, all the different countries. I'm talking about the continent. Argentina shouldn't be anything like as poor as it is. Indeed, Argentina could become the stock market of the world. It could become the hive of it all. So many countries have this unique connection to the land. However, South America has either been invaded or threatened to be invaded by a number of people around them. And of course, they themselves have fought back. But the reality here is that I think we will see either each individual country in South America choosing to be sovereign or forming an alliance with their neighboring country so that their pushing power is somewhat greater. And this is what we'll see under the new coming of the RV. We'll see sovereign nations, but sovereign nations making good friends with their neighbor so that they are able to, have a bigger voice. When did some of these small countries, I don't mean it disrespectfully, when did some of these small countries, and I mean that politically, in South America, ever dominate the world stage? And I think what we will see is sovereignty for all countries, but certain countries forming together. So it wouldn't surprise me if Iraq joined Kuwait and Kuwait joined Saudi Arabia. And then you had a golden real, you had a golden dinar. You basically had a individual sovereign country, but was signed up to a bloc so that its influence was greater. And you might find a mad rush of countries across the earth wishing to connect with like-minded countries and like-minded peoples. Yeah, that's something to be watched. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just mindful we'll probably get a lot of complaints in now saying, oh, Simon thinks that Iraq and Iran and Kuwait and so on are in South America. I just say, obviously you don't think that.
No, not today. Not today, but tomorrow tomorrow I might.
Oh, lovely. Okay, so next question is from a member in South Australia, who says, as CC has grown so quickly in the last 2 years, has Simon's vision for CC changed over time? And specifically, what are his hopes and dreams for CC as it stands now?
No, it never changed. I knew what we had to achieve within a split second. That was years ago. But I knew that it was dependent upon external forces. And I knew that certain elements or certain actions had to occur on the planet. And there are a lot of people who have been gracious enough to listen to me for a good number of years, and will remember me saying that the battle was always going to be in America. Thank goodness I said it, because there's so many people who say that I don't say things, but fortunately, many of you will have been around then, and you will know for a fact that it was one of my many sayings that the battle will be fought in America, because I was told it, not told it by a white hat. I saw it coming, and I knew that it was just part of something much greater that was the battle for humanity. Literally, were we going to make it or not? And so I knew that I had to do what I came here to do, which was to get CC up and running, to get the message about, and to draw people who are light workers, people who did wake up, could see the truth, and were prepared to put a bit of work in. And I don't care about the people who are brain dead. That may sound harsh, but I can't worry about them. It's for them to decide when they want to wake up. I will do my best to educate. I will do my best to help, but I'm not going to beat a dead horse, as we say in Great Britain, if somebody doesn't want to hear it. So I won't waste my time on that. I will actually spend my time in trying to develop our organization. And so, what we've done over the last few years is to make this network of CC worldwide, because the war is worldwide. Satan doesn't just sit in one place and say, here's a circle, I'm going to be evil in this circle. Satan wants the whole world. And we can't afford to let Satan have any of it. So basically, what I did was to say, I'm going to do what I want to do, which is to get people to support each other, communicate with each other, build that friendship, build that support. So when it all falls apart, as it appears to be just on the verge of doing so, we have each other and we have our belief and we know we're going to come through it. So no, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. I have been frustrated because I can only go at the speed of the external energies, and I have to wait for them. And it's terribly frustrating because I know exactly up here, it was years ago, I planned everything. I know exactly what I have to do. But there are lots of people like this who sit at home and they may invent something, but they can't bring it to market, or they can't do this and they can't do that until the time is right. So that's what we've been waiting for. The time is right. And when the RV is launched, when all of those unawakened, unaware people have had the choice through mainstream media to see the truth, we will then be in a much stronger position worldwide to appreciate just how close we were to falling off the precipice. And CC will have its role. Then we move into the second phase, which is the project phase, which is saying, right, okay, we've got our Earth back. Right now, let's see what we can do to do good work, do great things on this planet. And that's phase two. So at the moment, we're at the end of phase one. We're waiting for phase two. And that's, Putin has kicked off phase two. I mean, you could say that Trump kicked it off, but I would say that Trump was the transitional part. We're now on the edge of phase two. It's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm just reading questions from London. They're pretty much all about what you've already talked about regarding Russia and Ukraine.
Take one question from London, otherwise they're going to be really cockney and upset.
Well, it's South London, so they might not.
Oh, very much. Well, very much South London.
Okay. All right, I'll do one.
I can say that before we upset everybody.
All right.
Before we upset everyone, I used to live in South London. I used to live in Lewisham, so I know South London. So that's why I said that. Go on.
Okay, so with Chernobyl being taken over, is there a large dam underneath the area? Has the president of Ukraine been captured? And does Russia have important information captured, for example, biolabs to Wuhan, linked to Wuhan?
Oh, it's a good question because it's more detail than I gave out. Yeah, so it was captured because that's why they didn't cruise missile it. It was sent in by paratroopers. And actually, you might have caught yesterday, Putin actually publicly praised, not his armed forces. Putin publicly praised his special forces, because they captured intel. They captured individuals, very few of them, most of them got out, but what they captured was evidence that links these places to Wuhan. So you ask about the president. I think you find that the president of Ukraine is somebody that the White Hats can do business with. I think you'll find that. I think that there's a big game being played out. So yeah, I think that basically answers the specific questions you asked. Thank you.
Okay, great. This question is from Diana, the Mexican coordinator, who says it was one question from yesterday's Mexico Zoom. Okay. She says, I have heard Eleanor Danan talk about Antarctica and say that some world leaders have been taken there to negotiate with the alliance. According to Eleanor, these leaders are to be sent through a wormhole in Antarctica to another 3D planet where they will be able to continue with their deeds but never get out. In exchange, they will release the spell that was put on humanity to blind people from their actions. I understood that this spell was cast by a reptilian species of magicians and, according to the rules of magic, only they can uncast it. Do you know anything about this that you can share? Thank you.
There is some truth in this, but there's a lot of nonsense, in my opinion, my humble opinion. There isn't any spell that cannot be countermanded. You can countermand any spell. What one creature can create, another can decreate. But the decreator has to be more powerful than the creator of that spell, more learned, or more believing in themselves. Absolutely, Antarctica is the hellhole, and people have gone there to negotiate. It's unlikely that a good force would say, you give me the keys of your castle and I'll put you on another planet and you can create this hell all over again for someone else. It's not the way I would deal with it, because then I've only got to go back in 20,000 years and do it all over again. Why would I pass that? But, with the case of the reptilians, I mean, they made life absolutely miserable a long time ago, and they were just lifted up as a whole species, a whole group, and just dumped on another habitable planet. And then they just went and did it all over again. That's how we got, as a race, we got in their catchment area. So there's, it's not a good thing to do. You need to not push things under the carpet. You need to face things, and you need to be able to say enough is enough, and you're not going to do this anymore. But I can see deals done. Yeah, of course. I mean, there are some people that are so invested in the process that, that they would do that. But my understanding is that there was a wormhole in Antarctica, but it wasn't, it was more for communication channels. It was more to be able to talk directly. These aren't human creatures who are going to have this conversation. Remember that when CC played its part in turning off the CERN Hadron Collider, we prevented that device opening a portal and allowing lower fourth dimensional beings to either transition or to receive reinforcements. And so, there are working portals, but they are all controlled by the White Hats, what you might call the Alliance, because a portal is not allowed to be controlled solely by a human entity. A portal has to be jointly controlled. And so it would make perfect sense that, something that's not particularly human could have an audience with a group of interested parties to see if some sort of deal could be done. So I think there's a strong thread of truth in that, but I don't think the picture that's been painted to us, and I'm aware of this, is actually accurate. I think that the good guys have got to the point where they understand that if I have a broom and I sweep trash from one corner to another corner, it is only a matter of time before I'm then having to sweep the trash from that corner to another corner and another corner, and so on. And when are we going to stop doing that? So I think the time has come. We're stopping doing that, and we're saying that this isn't going to happen anymore. I mean, what you could do is put all these evil people in a in a dimensional bubble, don't give them any underlings or slaves. Just let them, manage each other. That would be very interesting, wouldn't it? Good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This question is from Joanne, our Asia Continental Coordinator. Members have asked, in your own words, could you please explain what is 5D and Christ consciousness?
In my own words, not in the words of the dog then, who is peacefully sitting here. Right, so 5D is a dimension where time and space is very different from the time and space we have. But then it's different in the fourth dimension. The difference between 5D and 3D, I'm not going to give you scientific, as I'm not interested in that. I'm only interested in the spiritual aspect, is that the fifth dimension doesn't have the barrier of the fourth dimension between it and God. Bottom line. We, unfortunately, have this fourth dimensional barrier between us and God. So once you break through the lower fourth, remember, it's the lower fourth that's the problem, not the upper fourth. Once you break through the lower fourth and predominantly into the fifth, then your thought processes, your communications are not hacked, they're not being corrupted, not being attacked. And that this evil vibrational energy which exists on the earth, courtesy of the lower fourth, can't exist in this higher vibrational frequency. So we're talking about being closer to God in the sense that we can see clearly, we are not confounded or confused as we are here, and we're not being tested in the same way. So that's my understanding of fifth dimensional. And what was the second part of that question, please, Becky?
Christ consciousness.
All right, Christ consciousness, which we do have here. Okay, it's something that can filter through the lower fourth dimension. Many, many people can have the Christ consciousness. It doesn't mean that you're Jesus Christ incarnated. You can't have the Napoleon consciousness, because lots of people believe themselves to be, Napoleon. But we are talking about a spark of energy which has seeded itself in a number of people over the planet in order for those individuals to try to achieve things without corruption. So the Christ consciousness is something that doesn't allow corruption. Think about Jesus in the desert and all the attempts to tempt Jesus, because he wasn't able to be tempted because of the consciousness, the Christ consciousness. And just as we have connecting consciousness, which means our consciousness connects not just across the earth, but right on up to the higher realms, to God self. So Christ consciousness is the values that Christ had. I don't mean the values that come to us today through the Bible. Unfortunately, much of that has been altered. Not all of it, but much of it has been faked and altered, sadly. But that consciousness that existed in Christ exists in many. Now, I don't want people to be confused. The godlike energy is in all living creatures and animals as well, everything. But humans have the choice to deny it or to embrace it. That's the choice we've been given. And if we choose to embrace it, then we are embracing the Christ consciousness. And then we can choose whether we export it to others or whether we just hold on to it for ourselves. And I'm not going to give an opinion as to what's right or wrong there. But the difference is between what we are having to suffer here and in the higher realms is that the devil don't tempt you in the fifth dimension. It just doesn't happen. It's here. This is the testing ground, the proving ground. This is where humanity either gets it or doesn't get it. And then we get our reward, not just in heaven, because we ain't got there yet, but we get our reward by moving to another frequency, fifth dimension. We're not going to sit in the fourth for very long, where we can actually live our lives in a way that we choose to, because at the moment we'd love to live our life as a sovereign being, can't do it because of this satanic cabal control. And so what the White Hats are trying to do in this time frame, in this world, is break us free from that. And then in time, we will ascend up to the fifth dimension and higher. Good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm just flicking through the questions. We've got so many, but there's two
just go on for a
questions.
bit more. Go on for a bit more till we drop down.
There's two questions which are quite similar.
Okay, go on.
Corey asks, why doesn't Simon discuss his communications and relationships with ET anymore? And along a very similar line, I'm just scrolling down. I'm scrolling up. Karen says, I second Corey's question. I've followed Simon since 2013 and loved his spiritual topics, ET, Jinn, and dimensional discussions immensely. We never hear those from him anymore. She also says, Becky, you were delightful on the feminine roundtables and have so much knowledge yourself. I'd love to see both of you return to these topics. Or we can certainly do your topics now about ET and so on. Okay, can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you. It's
okay.
Fine. Right, so at the moment, the message that I want to give to humanity is to resist the satanic forces, resist the cabal, to spread the message that we are in a war and that our attention shouldn't actually be on flying saucers. I am being funny, but our attention should be on what they're trying to do to our families, what they're trying to do to our communities. And so that is, and I don't want to water it down. You see, the thing is that there are many people who are fascinated by loads of topics and they can cope with it. But the vast majority of people can't cope with all these different topics. And they've been dumbed down by, the system. And so at the moment, the focus for me is literally the fight for survival. Literally, humanity is fighting for its survival. Bombs and bullets may not be falling on New York or Jakarta or London, but we are in a war. And so it isn't because I've gone off the subject at all. If I get called to a conference this year, I think I'm doing one in September, aren't I?
Yes.
Yeah, but if I get called to a conference and the conference organizer says, "Here, listen, Simon, do us your intel, and then can you talk for an hour or so on ETs?" I'd be delighted to, absolutely, because I'd be going to a conference that was specializing in ET disclosure, and that's what people are paying and coming to see, and I have no problem with that. But when I do a podcast, my message has got to be about our fight for survival. Some very exciting stuff with ETs. Don't be naughty. The dog gets very jealous. If a cat comes to say hello to me, he gets very jealous and doesn't want to share me, and you mustn't be naughty like that. So, what I'm trying to do is to spend my time on focusing on what I think is really important. And remember that a lot of the information I get is not just coming from the White Hats. There is the alliance, and the alliance isn't just Trump and Modi and Putin. It is a number of off-planet groups that have advanced technology. Where do you think the quantum stuff came from? It didn't come from someone's backyard, I can tell you that. So, no, once we got through this RV and we can all take a well-deserved holiday vacation, then, yeah, I'd be more than happy to talk about and update people on what's going on. Because once we've broken this cabal, we should expect some form of disclosure. And that's what's exciting. And I think certainly within our lifetimes, it will be actually taught as a topic in school. Because what governments have got to do is to move people to understanding that in this vast universe, multiverse of space, we're not the only intelligent creatures. Terribly arrogant to think that God just created us. That's the Bible of the Victorian times. You know, God created everything. He didn't just create this beautiful water world. And so I hope that in the future, children are taught that inclusion isn't just about people of color or people with a different sexual orientation. Inclusion might be something that comes from a very far distance away. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next question is from Hong Kong about Elon Musk. I have heard that he is working very closely with the Anunnaki, specifically Enki, or is an Anunnaki himself. Can you confirm? Many thanks.
I can confirm that he's not. He was a businessman who had an audience with Trump, and Trump made him a deal he couldn't refuse. Either you want to work with the White Hats, or you don't really want much future left for yourself. So Elon has been working very closely with the White Hats. Indeed, I'm hopeful that, never mind a Q phone, we get a T phone. Tesla, not Nikola Tesla, but Tesla the company. We get a phone that's specially designed by the White Hats that can't be hacked by the corrupt side. I think a lot of the satellites launched, Elon Musk has, SpaceX has been responsible for. I think that he's one of these entrepreneurs who sees a good deal come the RV. The world breaks free. A lot of these corrupt, huge money men no longer around to cause a problem. Big vacuum there. So he's a white hat. Why can't he have a slice of the action? No, he's not an Anunnaki. He's not. Like many, many people who have risen to the pinnacle of their position, they contain more alien DNA because that has allowed them to be successful in whatever frame or whatever field within the reality of this world. And so, when people do these history or these genealogy tests, and it comes back and it says so many percent of DNA we can't trace. Well, that's odd, because if you're human, it should say 100%, but it never does. It's sort of anything between 2 and 3 or 4%. Anything more than that, then you've probably got your flying saucer in your backyard to take you back, Friday and bring you back on the Monday. So the point is that there's a lot more alien in us than we appreciate, and hopefully the time will come when we can learn to appreciate and celebrate that. So there are people who have a considerable amount of alien material, but that doesn't make them evil. It's about your choice. It's your choice in each lifetime whether you're going to do good things or be bad things, whether it's service to self or service to others. And once you've chosen the path of good, the path of the light, when you reincarnate, you won't actually fall. You won't go back, because you've seen what it's like in God's frequency, and you never want to go back to the devil. Never, because the difference is indescribable. One can't use human language to describe the difference between God and evil. I guess a churchman, a pastor or whatever, could stand up and tell you the difference, but those are just words that don't actually convey the reality of the difference between the divine light of truth and the sinking corruption of evil. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Chris, our Greece coordinator, has said many European countries have lifted their coronavirus measures. In Greece, they started sending fines to unvaccinated people over 60 through the tax office. Members are asking if you have any intel about the situation in Greece. It doesn't seem to have an end soon. Thank you for keeping us informed and positive in these difficult times, and for this wonderful organisation you have created for us to stay connected and support each other. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, in some countries, the cabal is stronger than others. We saw that in Australia and New Zealand and some other places as well, which wouldn't normally come to our attention. And so where you have a strong cabal dug in, then it is harder or takes longer to get these rules lifted. And also, they went deeper into it. Resist it. If somebody finds you because you chose not to have the vaccine, tell them to take you to court. Ask them to bring forward from the Court of Human Rights what rule or law says that I have to be vaccinated by something that's still a trial drug. What right does anybody have to interfere with my body without my permission? You go to hospital and you're supposed to be able to sign a piece of paper authorizing it. You know, if I take my dog or cat to the vet, I have to sign a piece of paper authorizing the surgeon what he or she can do. So who the hell has got the right to say to you, because you didn't do what we told you to do, we're going to fine you? Now, that's different from if I take my motor car and I drive through a red light. I get fined for that. Because to drive is a privilege. It's not like breathing oxygen. It's not a right. And it could endanger life. So that's quite right that people should do that. But who can come to you and say, I want to stick a foreign object in your body, a needle or a swab or whatever it is? So say to them, you take me to court and you show me what law gives you the right to do that. So don't give in. Don't ever give in to these people. They're cowards. They're bullies. They have no right. They don't even have the right to shine your shoes. These are corrupt people. And I do pleasantly hope that they are dragged before some form of court and really taken to task for what they've done. And I'm sorry, I don't have any compassion, because we were sick of the history of the Second World War, where so many people said, well, I was only following orders. If you are a human being, you don't follow those orders. You don't do it because it's fundamentally wrong to the rights and freedoms that we should have as a citizen of the earth. So my point to you is push back on it. Don't spend your time biting your fingernails and worrying about who will knock on the door. Welcome it and say to them, you show me the proof. Don't show me an ordinance, a little rule. You show me from the Court of Human Rights, whether that's Nuremberg or The Hague, where you have the right to do this to me. I say, I won't pay it. That's what I would do. Someone did that to me. That's what I would do. You know, my kids are grown up, but if I had young children, anybody tried to come and put a needle in them, I can assure you that they wouldn't walk away easily. So don't give in. You have the right to defend yourself, your own physical body. You have the right to defend your family, and get them to show you a law that says you don't have the right to defend yourself or your family. So yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A question from Denmark. Our Prime Minister abandoned the COVID restrictions and cooperation on vaccine manufacturing with Israel and Austria overnight. Now it's all about aggression against Russia, and Denmark have invited the US to set up a base in our land, and of course a Navy exercise coming this week with a war simulation. Denmark is essential for passage in the Baltic Sea. What is really going on? Thank you.
No, Denmark is very much part of the White Hat group. Don't worry. They're playing their part beautifully. What the White Hats are doing is looking for friction between Russia and the West, and there will be friction plates, and those plates are the Baltic Sea, for instance. That's one such place where, say hello, where, you know, it's obvious to the public that there is an interaction between, say, Finland and Denmark and Norway, these countries which, you know, obviously the Americans and the Russians are overflying, want to have exercises there. So the White Hats are looking for what I'd call reasonable action. In other words, let's take Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who are not members of CC. God, I hope there isn't a real Mr. and Mrs. Smith who take this personally. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith is fictitious, who are not members of CC. Now, they'd be really surprised if Switzerland started mouthing off against Putin, because it just doesn't fit the history. But if a country that shares airspace in that sense of the word, or the waters, then they expect that. So they are being fed, all these unawake and unaware people are being fed a narrative from the White Hats, which in their minds they can grasp and follow, and it makes sense. It's actually no different from the Black Hats, who would also feed evil information to the same Mr. and Mrs. Smith in a way that Mr. and Mrs. Smith would buy into it. And this is what I meant, that the way that we're being battled with is fairly similar, but one side is good and one side is evil. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This question is from Cyprus. Does the Ukraine situation have to do only with earthly business, or is it involves destroying as well as extraterrestrial control center in eastern Ukraine, as it is said?
It's more of a demonic. Think of a telephone exchange in our language. Think of a telephone exchange. Well, imagine a demonic telephone exchange. Now, please don't think of something like Harry Potter with wires and cables dancing around. Think about certain artifacts that are placed in a location that allow demonic energies to communicate and make things happen. There's not alien, it's demonic. Whether there's anything demonic actually manning it, controlling it, that I don't know. But that is really what we're looking at there. The best thing to do with that is take it out with a cruise missile, unless you want to try and capture something, or unless you have to destroy it from the inside. Some of these facilities are not protected by concrete and steel as their final defense line. They are defended by an intent of evil energy. And often the only way you can deal with that is by getting inside it and demolishing it from the inside. You would often get people going in with the military who have the expertise to take on that demonic element, shall we say, to challenge it or draw its attention while the military did something else. It's not unlike what we did with CERN. We had a number of remote viewers battling the evil remote viewers. You know, we had a number of distractions going on so that our number one guy could get access while their attention was taken elsewhere and do what you have to do. So, you know, that's more of the location. Don't think of, you know, like a new Schwabenland, you know, flying saucer production line. Just imagine a very, very dirty, evil place that has the dial-ups for a number of other locations across the earth or off the earth for when they would hope to get their portals back. So yes, there certainly was something like that, but I don't know what became of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this question is from Croatia. I think you may have answered most of it, but I'll read the question out anyway. Ukraine situation. Is deep state using parts of Ukrainian army or even just some actors with military equipment to inflict damage to civilians, blame Russia in
we've had that.
media?
Absolutely. It doesn't surprise me that they know that, because this is a family and friends in that location, or Romania, Poland, Hungary, coming down into Serbia, the old Yugoslavia, coming through that. they've all got family and friends in that location, and those stories, they're not anecdotal. They are actually factual stories where the mercenaries, the private armies, have been shooting up apartments and then getting their best friends in the deep state to film it and then say that the Russians have done it. The Russian army is actually under orders not to fire on civilian property. That's why it's taking so long. It's got nothing to do with the Ukraine army fighting heroically to stop the Russians. It's because Putin said, I don't want you attacking civilian infrastructure. I want you to attack military infrastructure and go after the mafia. Because otherwise, you'd go back, think about 1945, when Russia attacked Berlin. It was street fighting, block after block. And what the Russians did was that they didn't go down the main Hindenstrasse. They shot a hole through one of the apartment blocks, right through it, and went through people's gardens. And they go through 20 gardens, then come out, shoot a hole and come out. And so they were fighting. And so that's why Berlin was blown to bits, because of the intense street fighting. That's not happening in Ukraine because Putin doesn't have a war with the people. He doesn't want a war with the people. Ukraine wants a war with the private cabal guards and members of the Ukraine government that are bribed by the Biden family. That's what's going on. Do you honestly think that Ukraine is still where it is today? Putin could have had that within 24 hours. But in doing so, there would have been thousands of people killed, thousands of properties destroyed. And this is not a war between Russia and the people of Ukraine. This is a war between Russia and the evil cabal and the private security guards and the mercenary men who are just in it for money. That's what this war's about. And Putin had the guts and the strength to say, half the world's going to hate me, but I'm going to do it anyway because I can't afford to have these biological laboratories on my soil right next door to me. And that's what's going on. So the Croatians have got exactly the right information. Unfortunately, the CNN or the BBC don't have the truth within themselves to put that truth out to the public. That day will change. And I hope to God that these journalists who are deliberately and willfully spreading lies not only never work again in the media industry, but are actually held up within a court of law for what they've done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've had so many questions from all around the world, and I apologise that we're not going to be able to ask all of them. I just wanted to ask two from members in the Caribbean islands, okay, and then move on to the Russia group, because amazingly, the Russia group have asked some really lovely spiritual questions. So I thought we'd finish with those. Okay. So from the Caribbean, USA could not make the January 31st or February 18th debt payments. Is the US corporation now fully bankrupt?
It is. It was semi-bankrupt months ago, but they were allowed by the White Hats to reuse or recycle that money that was in the system already. So it wasn't that a big vacuum was put in and sucked everything out. There was just no more allowed to be printed. So this was a gradual collapse. There was a legal understanding when their authority would end, and then an understanding when basically they just have no more money. And that's not a good thing in the sense that, their people's wages can't be paid. The system still largely depends on the old structures. And if the old structures run out of money, well, who's going to pay the guy who cleans the streets? Who's going to pay the person that drives around in a police car, etc., etc. And so there has to be enough money in the system so that, we can go in and get £100 out or $100 out to do our shopping, but not enough money in the system for them to go and pay a 10,000 strong mercenary army to recruit that and go and do something. That's been the battle. So we have a situation where there is zero money for big finance now. There's enough money for the regular stuff, but there's no big cabal money left. They did actually carry on printing to a certain extent in the Deutsche Bank and the Fed, but more in the Deutsche Bank. But that has been tracked, and I do need to say that the people who've been doing that are in a bit of trouble. And hopefully in the next few days, we're going to move completely off the SWIFT system, never mind Russia, completely off the SWIFT system, and move to a gold-backed or precious metal-backed currency. Even if we don't see that, next week in our bank, that will have occurred, I believe, and therefore the control or the influence of the not just the deep staters, but those who have made their career in the fiat currency, their ability to influence will just be gone. Therefore, we will see a sea change, because remember, governments can only operate on money. They don't, remember, operate on love. Not like CC, well, we do need money, but you know what I mean. These governments just want money. That's all they want. That's what they operate on. Now, if that's turned off from them, what's that government machine going to do? Now, they try to blackmail the white hats by saying, well, if we don't have the money, the hospitals will have no ambulances, and the crime, and houses will burn down. There won't be any fire engines or fire trucks. The reality is that there's a game going on between the system saying it needs the money for the emergencies, and the good guys saying, we're not really prepared to give you very much because we fear it'll just go back to bad causes. Remember, all this kicked off with child trafficking, paedophilia. That's what the white hats absolutely want to stamp out. And if you squeeze the cash off these evil people, they can't do it easily. So we are now, I would say, 3/4 job done in terms of the financial situation. And it's very positive and very exciting. It's terribly slow and terribly repetitive to keep being told that somebody's paymaster will be liquid on Tuesday, or I've been told my folks in the redemption center will be working all weekend and we're all going to get redemption and paid out on Thursday, Friday. That story's been going for months, years. And it will happen when it happens, and it will happen when it runs in tandem with the good guys taking control of certain key areas, and Ukraine is one of them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And also from the Caribbean, when the death of Queen Elizabeth II is announced, will all 59 Commonwealth countries have to go on lockdown, as the UK will have to?
I'm not convinced that the UK will go on lockdown. Neither am I convinced that 59 countries will do so. I think that the deep state plan is to try for a lockdown, and they would say that it was in mourning, to try to cover for the fact that the good guys would be doing certain things. So I could see how the deep state would try to steal that march, that thunder on the good guys. I don't know. I mean, how many days would you go into mourning for? When Queen Victoria died, we were a much different people here in Great Britain, with an empire that went right across the world. Now it seems to me that Commonwealth countries are doing everything they can to get away from Britain and set themselves up and be independent. And why wouldn't they? Those days are should be long gone. When the death of Queen Elizabeth II is announced, I will go about my daily life as I would normally. It won't have any effect on me at all. There will be quite a lot of people who will prostrate themselves in the street and weep and wail because their icon that they looked up to is no longer here. And that's the sign of the primitiveness of the human who's not spiritually awake. The reality here is that we should never be so attached to one person that when their demise is reported, that we feel that our life has ended. The reality is that a deal has been struck with the Queen. Trump did that. And therefore, she'll get quite a rosy obituary. I think that the royal family will be honoured and won't be vilified. And that'll be difficult for people who know what the truth is. But nevertheless, that I think is the way it will go. And I strongly hope that Commonwealth countries have the good sense to carry on their life as normal and not be so head down and disheartened that the Queen of England has died. I mean, what did the Queen of England do for Cameroon? What did the Queen of England do for Australia, Canada? Did the King do for India? You know, if we ask those questions, and please, 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 British people, don't tell me that the Queen is great for Britain because of all the tourists that come here. I love Americans, and they will stand outside Buckingham Palace taking pictures of a Rolls Royce that goes by. But we've got to get beyond this fixation with this type of human element. You know, I would much rather take pictures of a beautiful eagle in flight or my cat doing some crazy things than I would somebody who done nothing for me in a Rolls Royce with a massive police escort, clearly saying that they are better than us and they should have a better life than us. You know, that's a sign of primitiveness and unawakeness. Spiritual people will value the here and now, not some dead patriarch that, you know, did nothing for them except squeeze them of their resources and allow rulers in their name to abuse them, because that's actually what's happened. I hope when the announcement of the Queen goes out publicly, it is the sign for countries to break away. See, many countries feel they have a written agreement, not with Britain, but with Queen Elizabeth II. And when Queen Elizabeth II is officially announced as dead, that agreement is broken. Now, unless they want to go and sign a new agreement with whoever comes along, that is their chance for sovereign freedom. For God's sake, if you're given your freedom, take it. Don't even look back. Thank you, Becky.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we'll finish off with just a couple of questions from the Russian coordinator who has collected questions from Russia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Iran, Iraq, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan. Sorry, I can't read it properly.
Well, I know exactly what you mean.
Okay, so I'll just read a few of these because there's 17 questions, which is a great number, but I can't read them all now.
No, but we can honour the fact that we've got questions from Russia, and it's very important.
Absolutely. And okay, so does female energy and consciousness have special significance in this process for humanity's transition?
It does, simply because many religions have tried to crush the feminine, the divine feminine, tried to hide it or control it. So that should tell us immediately that certain religions are terrified of the female. And the reason for this is that female energy is creative, masculine energy is often destructive. And so that female energy is very powerful. And we've always associated the earth with feminine. So that, in the words of the BBC, tells us all we need to know. In other words, that the feminine when combined with the masculine, and the masculine when combined with the feminine, providing the balance is good, is exactly what we want. But what masculine has tried to do is the Enli Enki, and it goes right back, of course, has tried to do is to dominate the female energy by saying, you know, oh, look at Mary, you know, Jesus and Mary, look at that. Look at this. And it's gone right through. And just because you get a prime minister like Margaret Thatcher, who's a woman, doesn't mean that we look on women purely as men. And well, I want to actually qualify that. You will find that women who go into the man's world, these are the words of the cabal, these are the words of the control, want to dress like a man, want to put a suit on, you know, they want to be serious, like dark jacket and slacks or pants, as you know, in America, or trousers. Why does a woman have to hide her femininity because she's going into a serious world? This is the bullshit. This is the crowd. President Trump used the word bullshit at CPAC, and they all jumped up and cheered. You know, this is ridiculous. We need to understand that we shouldn't be frightened of feminine energy. We shouldn't make it masculine. We shouldn't hide it in men's clothes. You know, we should understand that that's it. And if men are frightened of it, that's their problem, isn't it? It's because they're not confident within themselves. And, you know, Freud would then talk about their mother and father and et cetera, et cetera. Well, we haven't got time to bring Freud on, if he's listening. So the reality is that the divine feminine is absolutely vital, and why we go right back to the story of the apple and the snake, and why the church was desperate to tarnish the feminine vibe, why women couldn't be in church, priests, until very recently. You know, why would a religious order say to a woman, you can be a nun, but you can't be a vicar or a priest? Of course, the rules change now. But why did it take so long? Because the church was, can I say, hell bent? And that would really upset people in the church, wouldn't it? The church was hell bent on preventing women from having any position of responsibility. And you know why that might be? You know why? Because a woman isn't going to be a paedophile like a man is. Because if you've got a load of churchmen together, then they can all be paedophiles and they can hide it and cover it all up. You start bringing women on and they say, oh, I don't like this, we need to report this. Let's understand it, that the divine feminine is absolutely vital to the well-being of this planet. It's a good question. Thank you, Russia.
I think it's really important as well to make the distinction, because, you know, the feminine energy has good qualities, and it has positive qualities, and it has negative qualities, just the same as the masculine energy has positive qualities and negative qualities. I think, you know, both men and women, you know, you mentioned the word paedophile, we know there's some well-known women who've been involved in that aspect, so they're not completely exempt from it. But I think it's really important to, as you said, the balance between the good qualities of divine feminine and the good qualities of divine masculine. That is what we're aiming for, and that will bring a wonderful balance and bring forward positivity on our planet, on this earth.
I can't disagree with you, but I would just say to you that there's thousands of men in the Catholic Church who've been arrested for paedophilia, and a handful of women. But that's why, you know, it's the old boys network, isn't it? You don't let women in because they will have a different value. Of course, they have a different value because their energy is different. They are creators. They're not destroyers. So it wasn't a question about the Russian war then. It was a spiritual question from Russia.
We've got lots of spiritual questions. I'm going to come to 3 because I think it's interesting. But there's 3 questions. What is the soul? What is the spirit? And what is consciousness? Right, and I think it'd be good to combine the 3 of them.
Okay. Well, unintentionally, you've answered the question. Well done, you.
Okay.
Yeah, you cannot look on them as separate. They are one, but they are separate within one. So let's just read them through. You've gone for the spirit. What is the soul?
What is the spirit? And what is consciousness?
Okay. Right, so let's go through this. Let's do with the soul. The soul is you, your trademark, I say programming, please don't get me wrong, I don't mean mind control or computer programming. It's what makes you tick. So the soul is you. That is what works with your organic brain and your physical body and makes you you. So you can't just be a soul, you can't just be a body. That is you. The spirit is the different frequency. How can I do this? I've always described the soul as an almond shape or that sort of shape. Well, that's the soul, but the spirit is the energy that is produced, and it's the brightest light that sits around the edge of this, not elliptical, but it's sort of that shape. And that is the intent. It's the consciousness part of the soul. So the soul is the nuts and bolts part, but the spirit is you've heard that people talk about the moving spirit. The spirit moved me, right? It's this higher frequency of your soul. It's a spirit that is connected through consciousness to all others, whereas the soul is connected through the spirit, but it's the spirit that connects. I could do a whole day on this because it's so fascinating. What was the third part of the question? They said,
what is consciousness?
Right, okay. So when we created Connecting Consciousness, then we decided that we understood to a level what consciousness was and why it was important. If I was talking to 5-year-olds, and I'm not talking to 5-year-olds, please don't, so many people get upset. If I was talking to 5-year-olds, I would talk about a house and people in the house, all sitting in the house. Let's say they're very intellectual and they're all playing chess. They're not watching television, they're not watching the BBC, they're playing chess or what have you. But up towards the roof is an ether. And all their thoughts, all their desires, all the values, all go up, and like what you'd call the cloud in the modern day, young people would call the cloud. And it's all in real time. But it all connects to the DNA, it connects to the spirit, and to a lesser extent, the soul. And God's energy is through that. And so in real time, everyone is experiencing, but because we've all been mind controlled when we went to school or kindergarten, and we were brainwashed into believing that we don't have those gifts, we don't have those abilities. And those very few and far between of us who had it, usually had the CIA knocking on their door saying, can we take your kid off to special school, please, and get you levitating objects. So consciousness is everyone's reality if you can access it. If you think of the Akashic records, two sorts of Akashic records, I'm not talking about the DNA Akashic records, I'm talking about the wider Akashic records, that it's there, but very few people can access that Akashic records. But that's a consciousness. It's a consciousness of the past, the present, and what's projected to be in the future. So if you can access that, then you are accessing a consciousness. It's the difference between two telephone lines where the message goes down the copper cable, and the only person that can get the other message is the recipient on the other end, and somebody broadcasting on a radio set, and then anybody who's got the radio set, providing it's got the power to push it across the world, can pick it up. And that's the difference. So consciousness is everywhere, but how many of us can connect to it and have a two-way communication? So brilliant question. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so the last question I'm going to ask in today's podcast is, will everyone be sovereign?
No. Some people aren't going to want to be. God knows why they wouldn't, but some people love being victims. Some people love the oppression. Some people are so Stockholm syndromed that this is the world they want, and they'll I must say be dragged screaming. Nobody's going to drag them out, but that's where they sit. That's their frequency. Everyone will be offered the opportunity to be sovereign, actually, you've got to be brave to take it. Now, you guys listening to me across the earth, listening to this will say, well, everyone's going to want to be sovereign. Why do you have to be brave to be sovereign? No, you're listening to me because you know the truth. So you want to reach out and I'll have that. Yes, please. It's mine by right. I should have had it. I did have it. Somebody took it away. Now I want it back again. There are so many people out there that are frightened of sovereignty. They'll see the word sovereignty as responsibility. You see, what the cabal has done is it's made people lose responsibility and be little robots. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you're lucky, you've got a job. You go to work, you're told what to do. You feel confident that you know what to do. Saturday, Sunday, you might work, but let's just do the traditional pattern. I go home and I go to the supermarket and I do this and that. And that's your world. And it goes on and on and on and on. There's no responsibility. Oh, I've got responsibility. I've got responsibility for children. Or when the light bulb stops working, I've got responsibility for changing that. That's not responsibility. Responsibility is real, true sovereignty responsibility. Responsibility not just for yourself, but for others, service to others. So there are going to be a lot of people that don't want that. They just can't hack it. They just don't want to do it. They're just not in that energy field. So I don't know what's going to happen to them. I don't really care. Because if it's their choice to be separate from the rest of us, that's their choice. And I'm going to honor their choice. I'm sick of talking to people who are so brainwashed that they just shrug their shoulders and say, well, if you put a white coat on and a stethoscope round your neck, I'll do anything you tell me to do. And I've given up with those people. So there will be a sizable proportion of people that will come across, but will take time. And there'll be a sizable proportion that actually decide that, no, thank you very much indeed. It's not for them. They like the world they live in. But for those of us who are ready, willing and able, then that opportunity will be there. And it will come through reduction in taxes, a reduction in the way that governments treat us, changing the law, move to common law, away from naval law, in the way that we are respected in terms of how our wishes are translated through government into action. Because at the moment, the people's wishes don't go anywhere. How many times have a large group of people, I'm not talking about the Canadian truckers, a large group of people campaigned for something, and the cabal say to you, this is the way you need to demonstrate. You go and do a petition. That was the thing of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, petition. 100,000 signatures, and you take it up to wherever, and you proudly present it. And there's a big photograph, and the person takes all the boxes in, and then puts them in the fire and burns them all. But don't tell you that. That's how people are treated. And then Tony Blair decided that we use the modern age and, get 100,000 interests on this particular website, and we will debate this in government. It's a bit like somebody in government being caught and in deep trouble. So what do? They say, let's have an inquiry, bring a judge in, independent inquiry. By the time that inquiry is done, all the people who were a part of it are dead. All the people who had an interest in it are now moved on in their life. And that's what governments do. They have an independent inquiry, which will take us 10 years. I remember when there was a big thing about miners dying of coal dust. They were getting a poison of the lungs. And there was an inquiry, and it went on for years and years and years. And in my opinion, that was deliberate, because all of these men who had been disabled through their employer's work in the coal mine were entitled to thousands of compensation. And by keeping this going for years and years, they all died. So you only had a small number of people left, and that's what corruption is. That's what people don't seem to understand. I was a politician for 3 terms of office. I know exactly how these evil people operate. And, I'm very proud of the fact that I left politics, not because I was beaten at an election, because I walked away. I didn't get beaten by the voters. The voters didn't throw me out. I walked away. I did my full term, my term of office. And then when it came up for re-election, I said, no, thank you. I'm not going to stand again. You find somebody else. And so I know how it works. And I appreciate evil. I appreciate it. I see how it works. I can understand it. And that's why it has to be destroyed. And, there are lots of people out there who don't like what I say, and they troll and they write in. And I like what Charlie Ward said. Charlie Ward said that, all these trolls out there, what they're doing is they're covering for the pedophiles. They're covering for the evil people. They don't like the words that I say or others say because, we don't like child trafficking. We don't like pedophilia. And so when we get attacked, it's clear that the people that are attacking us because they obviously do, like that type of thing. Otherwise, why are they attacking us? Why are they trying to cover? So Charlie Ward's right when he said that last week. He said all the people that give him a hassle, they're trying to take the spotlight off what he's talking about. And it's not just about the RV. I mean, Charlie and I and others talk about all these children that are being rescued out of tunnels. That's to be celebrated. So why are people attacking us? Because clearly they think it's good to keep people in tunnels. They think it's good to do all that. All right, so when you see these people who attack truth speakers, then you turn on them and you say to them, well, obviously, you're part of this cabal. You're obviously paid for, or you're part of it. Why else would you be filled with this venom and evil? And the time is coming when, the sword of justice is moving across the planet. It's in Ukraine at the moment. It will move across. And it'll be very interesting to see the new world that we're in. And it's not a new world order. Okay, that was their plan. Remember the bad guys? Their plan was to take us and wipe us all out. That was their new world. And then we've got this new birthing world, this new world of light, which is the world that we want to see. And that's the world that we're absolutely determined that we all reach, as many of us as possible. And, connecting consciousness will play its part. Now, we'll finally finish. If we wouldn't have our finger on the pulse, if we didn't have our finger on the button, that's not the nuclear button for all those people who get upset. If we didn't actually have that, we wouldn't be supported as we're supported. We wouldn't be in this position. And when the times change and we're in this sovereign world, then connecting consciousness will have a remarkable position to play in terms of bringing spiritual vision to people in government who up to that point had zero. And there are lots of good people, they just got zero understanding, but they're inherently good. They've just got nothing there. And so we will play our part, as will others, in not just bringing projects, because I've said, what is the earthly point in doing a good project if some idiot turns up with a clipboard and says, well, you can't do that because Ordinance 4627/481173529B says you can't do it. So we don't just need the resources to put projects in place. We need governments to be changed and laws to be changed. So this is what the change has got to come to the earth. It's not just in one little pocket here. It's got to be right across so that we can actually roll our sleeves up and get cracking and start doing the good work that we all came here to do. And those people who clearly came here to do bad work, well, we've got to have our garden so beautiful that those people aren't allowed in it. In fact, they can't even come in it because their energy is so base, so low, that the beautiful flowers, the beautiful trees just won't tolerate them. And they'll say, oh, I don't like this. I prefer to be underground in a big bunker. So I think through natural selection, the human race will decide where it wants to go. So thank you, everybody. You know, I don't do these very often. There are lots of people that do it regularly. I just don't know how they do it. I just couldn't come before you, you know, every day. And as some of these people were doing about 50, 60, 70 messages a day on there, you know, I don't know how they do it. I couldn't. The frequency, the energy would just burn me out. You know, you have to put, when you're in spiritual movement, you have to put so much into it. It's not like, well, I've got to do 10 cars through the checkup and make sure that, you know, this is about people, this is about life, and it's investing in those people. So I can't do this. I can do it when we do it, when we have the time to do it, when I've got something to say to everybody. But let's please be calm. There's so much excitement, which isn't really that helpful. And let's just see it through. We will do it. We will get there. And, you know, just remember, there are people out there whose job is to destabilize you. There are people out there paid to actually make you sick, to make you worried. That's their job. I say to them, go and get yourself a job that helps humanity, not just service to self. Can you imagine cabal paying people just to hack into, I don't know, a hospital website, not to gain information to help the white hats, but just to make it difficult for patients to get their appointments, or to go to a library and make the library close, or, you know, that's what the cabal do. They pay people to spread evil. And remember this final point here. Evil people receive the highest accolades, whether it's in the entertainment industry or the political world or what have you. You know, Tony Blair was made a European minister, etc., etc. So evil people are rewarded because that's what the evil system does. Good people are oppressed because that's what the evil system does. Good people don't get Oscars. They don't get this award, that award. I'm not saying everybody who got an Oscar is evil. Let me just make that clear. But what I'm saying is that the cabal call the shots. They said, let's reward that person. We won't reward that person. So let's just see what we can do to assist and to help. I don't know what that is. Probably the cabal didn't like me and trying to remove me. Said removing. That's very fascinating. So the reality is that we've got to move into a world where goodness is rewarded and evil is expunged. And if we don't do it, we've failed. Absolutely. But the human race has never been at this position before. Remember the Matrix? What was it? 6 or 7 times? Neo had been there. You know, and this is it. This isn't, you know, this isn't the first time we've been here, but this is the first time we've advanced this far. So each time we've got like to there and then fallen back again and fallen back again. This time we're up here, and that's a really good sign. So listen, lots of love to everybody, and I mean it. We need it. We certainly need love. There's enough hatred out there. And thank you so much for listening, keeping strong, supporting others as well as yourself, and not being destabilized by these idiots, these mindless idiots, or just literally people who are empty-headed, who are running around panicking and screaming. You know, let's not panic. All right. Do you want to say goodbye, Becky?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and lots of love to everybody.
Okay, well, just thank you to the coordinators who
absolutely,
picked up those questions for us. And if you do want to put a question to us, because Becky can answer some of these questions rather well, actually, do write on Mighty Networks, and there's a chance that your question will get through. And thank you for being part of CC. And, you know, did you want to say goodbye? No, he's in a funny mood today. Right, so thanks very much. Take care, everybody.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.